Charles breaks down after Camilla says she never truly loved him at all. It wasn't the photo, the gifts, or even the wine glass. It was the silence that followed, the kind that spreads like smoke in a locked room, filling every inch with unease. Clarence House had seen scandals, secrets, and betrayals over the decades, but what unfolded behind its stone walls in the summer of 2025 would leave a different kind of stain. A quiet fracture in the very foundation of what was supposed to be the last love story the British royal family could defend. Camilla didn't mean for it to spiral like this. At least, that's what she told herself as she stood in front of the mirror that morning, brushing a final touch of powder over the hollowness just beneath her eyes. She'd gotten used to playing queen. The smiles, the wave, the tight jaw when photographers yelled Diana's name even after all these years. But nothing prepared her for Julian Ashford. He wasn't a stranger. He was a ghost from another life. Before Charles, before crowns, before everything became protocol. They met again at a climate fundraiser in Bath, and in that moment, surrounded by violin strings and polite applause, he didn't see the queen consort. He saw Camilla. Just Camilla. The girl who once snuck cigarettes behind the stables and danced barefoot at countryside balls. That look in his eyes, that was the start. She didn't plan for anything. It was just talk, a shared laugh, a memory, then a glass of wine, then another. And when his hand brushed her shoulder, she didn't flinch. Because for the first time in years, someone touched her without thinking of what headline it would turn into. But someone did. A photo made it to the front page of the Daily Mail the next morning. Her smile caught mid-laugh, his fingers barely resting on her sleeve. Camilla's new companion, the headline teased. But the image screamed something louder. It screamed betrayal. Inside Clarence House, the fallout was immediate. Advisors scrambled. Aides whispered. Royal protocol manuals were pulled out like wartime strategy guides. But the one person who didn't ask for explanations, at first, was Charles. He was still recovering at Balmoral, sipping tea through trembled hands, the chemo leaving his voice thinner than it had ever been. And yet, when he saw the image, when he read the articles, he said nothing. Until that morning. Camilla walked into the study, expecting maybe a cold stare, maybe a stifled sigh. Instead, she found 3 tabloids neatly laid out on the desk. The headlines didn't need translation. Her smile beside Julian, the bracelet. The vintage Rolls Royce. She opened her mouth. Charles raised his hand. Explain it, and she did, or tried to, fumbling through words like friendship and support and loneliness. But the damage was done. Charles wasn't angry. That would have been easier. He looked broken, not just as a man, but as a king. I stood by you when no one else would, he said, his voice cracking through the grief. I made you queen, Camilla, and now they're calling me a fool. She wanted to say it wasn't like that nothing happened, that Julian never crossed the line, but she knew that didn't matter anymore. In the monarchy, perception is reality. The room went quiet again. Charles turned toward the window. Camilla stood still, not out of fear, but because she knew, really knew, that something had shifted, something that couldn't be undone. And just like that, the first real crack appeared in the last fairy tale they had left. The tabloids didn't slow down. If anything, they sharpened their knives. The Mirror dug up old photos of Julian and Camilla from decades ago, smiling at a charity polo match, exchanging what now seemed like loaded glances at a garden party in the early 2000s. The Sun splashed a headline across page 1. Queen's secret comfort. Who really stood beside her? The public ate it up. They always did. But inside the palace, the whispers became harder to ignore. William was the first to act. No aides, no fanfare. He showed up unannounced at Clarence House in a gray sweater, his jaw tight, his phone already buzzing with updates from palace staff and PR heads. He didn't waste time. You need to fix this, he said, standing across from Camilla in the West drawing room. I've done nothing wrong, she replied, her voice sharp but tired. It doesn't matter, he snapped back. You know how this works. Perception is the crown now. Anne arrived minutes later, equally cold. She didn't sit, just stood near the window like a soldier, refusing to acknowledge the battlefield behind her. You think this family can survive another humiliation, she asked flatly. Diana nearly cracked it in half, and now this? Camilla felt cornered, the pressure closing in like a velvet noose. She knew she couldn't argue her way out of it. There were photos, gifts. The bracelet alone was enough to ignite suspicion. And though she hadn't slept with Julian, hadn't broken vows in the physical sense, she'd allowed herself to slip into something far more dangerous: emotional intimacy. She tried to explain it, that she had no one, that the aides were too afraid to speak plainly, that Charles, lost in sickness and silence, barely looked at her some days, that Julian made her laugh, reminded her she was human, not just a royal chess piece. But none of it mattered to Anne or William. They didn't see weakness, they saw betrayal. "You made a fool of my father," William said, voice low now, steady but cutting. "And when this all blows over, that's what he'll be remembered for. The king whose queen smiled for the cameras while he fought for his life." Camilla didn't cry, not in front of them, but her throat closed like a fist around her voice. She reached up instinctively, fingers brushing against the ruby bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve. She thought about taking it off right then and there, throwing it onto the table like an offering, a sacrifice to prove her guilt was circumstantial, not intentional. But she didn't. Maybe because part of her still needed that reminder that someone had seen her. The silence stretched until Anne broke it. "Do whatever damage control you must, but don't drag this family down with you," and with that, they left. No hug, no gesture of unity, just two silhouettes vanishing down the corridor, the soft click of their heels echoing like a verdict. That night, Camila sat alone in her bedroom. She didn't sleep, didn't eat. She just stared out the window. The London sky painted with the dim orange hue of streetlights and unanswered questions. On the table beside her sat the bracelet, not on her wrist, just resting there, sparkling under the lamp like a confession. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her messages, hovered over Julian's name. Her thumb trembled. And then, with a long breath, she pressed call. "I can't see you again," she whispered when he answered, "not because I want to stop, but because I have to." Julian didn't fight it, he just said, "I understand." And that was the last word between them. The official statement came on a Wednesday morning, bland, clinical, and carefully worded. Her Majesty Queen Camilla will be temporarily stepping away from royal duties to focus on her health and personal reflection. No mention of Julian, no reference to Charles, just a sterile note buried beneath coverage of a new trade deal and Wimbledon scores. But everyone knew what it really meant. Camilla disappeared, no public outings, no scheduled appearances, not even a glimpse from a palace window. She became a ghost in a castle. Whispers circled that she had retreated to a countryside estate in Sussex, others said France. The truth was simpler, she never left Clarence House. She just stopped living in it like a queen. Inside those grand stone walls, her world shrank. The woman who once commanded rooms with tailored poise and learned grace now sat for hours in the north reading room, surrounded by books she didn't read. Her phone stayed silent. The bracelet, once worn so often it left an impression on her skin, had been locked away, tucked in a velvet box beneath a key that no one asked about. Charles never asked, not once. He hadn't removed her title, he hadn't made any announcements, but she no longer stood beside him in official portraits. She wasn't at his side when foreign dignitaries visited. She didn't light the annual lantern for the Queen Mother's memorial. Each absence, though unspoken, drew its own conclusions. One evening, a longtime servant entered the drawing room to find her sitting completely still, staring at a blank sheet of paper. A silver Parker pen rested beside it, symbolic perhaps of the letters she used to write Charles in their early days. Words that once sparked a revolution of heart now couldn't form. The page stayed blank. By September, the tabloids had moved on. A scandal in the music industry, a foreign royal wedding. Camilla was slowly being edited out of the national narrative, not through punishment, but through silence. And in many ways, that was worse. She didn't miss the spotlight. What she missed was being seen, not photographed, not reported on, seen, heard, felt. She missed the way Julian's voice dropped when he asked if she was okay. She missed being asked how she was sleeping, not for protocol, for care. But the cost of that comfort had been clear the moment Charles looked at her with those eyes, tired, betrayed, and hollow. Not because he was angry, but because he had truly believed she'd be his last chapter, and now he wasn't sure he'd even be hers. On a foggy afternoon in late October, Camilla requested something strange. She asked for the cabinet key. Alone in her room, she opened the velvet box. The ruby bracelet still shimmered, untouched by time. She held it in her palm for a while, then walked it down to the cellar herself, placing it in a sealed envelope addressed to no one. She didn't destroy it, that would have meant denying it ever mattered. But she buried it. That was enough. Charles never asked her about it. But one morning, as she poured his tea in quiet ritual, he looked up and said, "Do you think we can ever be just us again?" She didn't know what us meant anymore, but she nodded, not out of certainty, but because the question alone was more than she thought she'd ever get. And from then on, they existed side by side, not quite broken, not quite whole, a king and a queen, bound not by love's fire, but by the cold understanding of its aftermath. The crown didn't fall, but something else did, and whatever it was, it wouldn't be returning.